Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Feels like a Saturday night. I don't even know what day it is because it's half term and kids are about. Mrs. is not at work, and so I get confused. But anyway, I probably shouldn't be doing this. I went to the cinema just now, watched Hamlet with my missus. Shed a tear, beautifully emotional film. Although she came out, she was like, I'm not really sure I understood it. So I had to explain the kind of metaphor of the place that the role that art plays in connecting with people, allowing them to grieve, and so on and so forth. I thought it was a brilliant film, amazingly acted, and then came home, had some wine whilst watching the second series of The Night Manager. And Tom Hiddleston and Hugh Laurie, etc., Olivia Colman, and thought, right, now's the time, as Mrs. has gone to bed, now's the time to do a video. So probably unwise of me to do so, a couple of glasses of wine down, but it's okay because, you know, I'm still going. So there's an awful lot to talk about. Geneva trilateral meeting has just finished today, and it appears to have included Europe, although I'm not quite sure how involved Europe were, or European nations, European diplomats were involved in the discussions. I know that Ukraine wanted them to be there, which is very important in and of itself. So we're going to start with Geneva, then move through lots of countries to just discuss what's going on in the world in the crazy timeline that we all exist in. It's all happening. If you haven't seen my video on Canada earlier, I think it's worth seeing. I'm not saying it's a good video, but it's an important video giving you an insight into the movements going on in the world, and really where the United States, qua Trump's administration, is pushing erstwhile allies. Countries that should be aligned to the United States are moving towards, say, China, towards each other, Europe and Canada, Australia, Japan, Indo-Pacific, even China getting closer with all of these nations. There's an element that we're going to return to that in this video. Interesting to look at what's going on between China and Africa. So that's something I'm going to add in that just sort of confirms the nature of what is going on at the moment. And I think that the American public, I think, is starting to rue the decision to elect Donald Trump. And we're also going to look at that. There's a few very key figures who are now starting to really go to town on criticizing Trump. People who are very much GOP adjacent, Sean Ryan, Andrew Schultz, Joe Rogan, that kind of sphere, are now openly criticizing Trump. And I think there's some trouble in the GOP, but he still has that grip over the media and the grip over his own lawmakers to a significant degree. So lots to talk about. Thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate you guys in the live chat. Thank you very much for that. I don't say thank you enough to Grimsoft, who manages the Discord server. So if you have a chance to run over to Discord and join in there, you can continue your conversations that we have in the live chats, and just generally take part in awesome community stuff. So okay, thank you. Let's get on and talk geopolitics. So before we do that, I have to remind you to like, subscribe, and share. I can't imagine any of you aren't subscribed to the channel, but just check that you are subscribed, because sometimes you get unsubscribed. YouTube does funky things for reasons unbeknownst to anyone on earth but their own algorithmic pixies. Please do subscribe if you haven't already done so. Okay, let's get into the long weeds of all this stuff. Now, I am pretty much on my own today, so apologies for that. If you have particularly pertinent questions, somehow highlight them. I'm not saying do a super chat, but it can be a little bit difficult for me to see them in all of the torrent of great comments that you guys have. Okay. Oh, and thank you. This is why Cheryl is so awesome. I'm sure it's Cheryl. Yes, of course it is. Thank you for whacking that Discord link in the live chat. Awesome source. Right. Okay. So the first day of trilateral talks in Geneva has concluded. NSDC, so that's the Security Council Secretary, Rustem Umerov, said after a joint meeting, the sides worked in groups on practical issues and possible mechanisms, political and military tracks wrapped for today. Work will resume tomorrow morning. So that doesn't really say a lot. What I can say is it appears to have been, well, I think the whole, as far as I can work out, Zelensky has made a differentiation between the talks with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff as being generally fine, that he doesn't feel the pressure from them that he feels from Trump. That's, I don't know if I've got a link for that, but that was something I've just read, which is very interesting. It doesn't surprise me at all. It's starting to come to a head, and Zelensky is starting to be far more open about where he thinks Trump is. And that's something worth watching. So, for example, Zelensky said it was, quote, not fair that Trump publicly pressures Ukraine and not Russia to make concessions, according to Axios. Quote, I hope it's just his tactics and not the decision. This is something that really needs to be, the boil needs lancing. This needs to be outed, because at the moment, Trump is putting all of the pressure on Ukraine. It's completely unfair. And Trump needs to be told that that's completely unfair. But the problem is, if it just keeps coming from Zelensky, it looks like Zelensky's just whinging and Trump would just have none of it. But the reality is Trump is being entirely unfair and completely beholden to Russia. Now, there could be, do I bring this in now? Let's bring this in now, because I think there might be something in this. Okay, a lot earlier than I was expecting to. Check this out. This is Ayatollah Khamenei from Iran. Notice what he says in his first phrase here. The island of corruption is only one example. There is much more of this. Just as this was not apparent and then became exposed, there are many other things that will soon come to light. Right, we are hearing, and I haven't got this in this video, but just to let you know, there is an amassing of American Air Force material. It looks like the US is going to hammer Iran very soon. And then the Ayatollah releases a statement that mentions the island of corruption, i.e. Epstein Island, is only one example. There is much more of this. Just as this was not apparent and then became exposed, there are many other things that will soon come to light. This is very clever of Khamenei to do this. This is Iran saying, look, US, if you're going to strike us, we are going to release a bunch of stuff. And we know the Iranians are very, very active online in cyber warfare. They have lots of bots and trolls. This is, 51 fighters in the last 24 hours, says Kevin Force. They're really massing material near Iran. Brian Krasenstein says, wow, maybe I'm reading this wrong, but it appears that Iran's supreme leader is threatening Trump in that he will expose his corruption if Trump decides to bomb Iran. Note the island of corruption is referring to Epstein Island. And I don't doubt that Iran has compromise on Trump. Goodness me, I think anyone can have compromise on Trump because he's going around the world grifting and grifting. So when we're trying to work out why Trump is just not putting any pressure on Ukraine, not putting any pressure on Russia and all the pressure on Ukraine, you wonder whether Putin, behind closed doors and on the end of the telephone, is saying all of these kinds of things. And I'm pretty sure that he is. And I just think that the American administration, I'm sorry, my good American friends here, but it is just compromised. It's corrupted. Donald Trump needs to go. Honestly, he is bad news. This is it. Zelensky advised Witkoff and Kushner not to try to force him to promote a worldview that his own people would perceive as a failure. So Trump is trying to push us, says Zelensky, to give up Donbas for nothing. And if we do that, that won't cut it with the Ukrainian population. You can't ask me to do that. So please do not try and force me to promote this worldview or this scenario whereby we end up just capitulating. Ukraine says it needs 60 days for a referendum on any peace deal. Russia offered one. This is the idea that I think it's referring to the idea that Russia said it would stop bombing Ukraine for a single day so that they could hold elections. It's like, really? Zelensky called it absurd and took aim at Russia's new lead negotiator for philosophizing, about historical roots. Quote, we don't have time for all this shit, he said. Now, this is Medinsky, the guy that they've now pulled in to be in charge of the Russian negotiating team. He's this quasi-historian bloke that is just full of hot air. And apparently some people are saying he's just been put in there to stall the negotiations. Well, actually, Zelensky said in full. That was not the one. Where was it? No, it might be actually. It wasn't. So I have accidentally copied the wrong one there. But anyway, this is worth looking into. I just must find this though, because it's really super important. Oh, damn it. I hate it when I haven't copied and pasted the right thing. Goodness. Yeah, it's not here. Basically, the whole thing where he said, here it is. I found it. No, that is the right one. Oh, yeah, it is the right one. Sorry, there are two Barak Ravid ones. I wasn't reading that carefully enough. I've got two double Barak Ravid ones. Anyway, Zelensky noted that, like Putin, the new Russian chief negotiator, Medinsky, likes to philosophize about the historical roots of the war. So this is a reference to Russia's or Putin's obsession with the historical roots. Like, if we don't solve the roots of the war, if we don't sort that out, then the war's not coming to an end. Of course, the roots are denazification, getting rid of the Zelensky government, demilitarization, which is reducing the size of the army, and all this kind of stuff that's never going to happen, or at least it shouldn't happen. But the Americans are trying to, I think, put pressure on Ukraine to make that kind of thing happen, which is exactly what the Russians want. But the new Russian chief negotiator likes to philosophize about the historical roots of the war. Quote, "We don't have time for all this shit, so we have to decide, and we have to finish the war," he said. So, yeah, it doesn't look like it went particularly well in Geneva. It might be easier for Trump to pressure Ukraine, this is a quote from Zelensky, than the much larger Russia. So he's just openly coming out and saying now that it seems that Trump is happier to put pressure on Ukraine because he perceives it as a smaller entity, as this thing that he can put pressure on, that he feels he can't put pressure on Russia. I mean, it might come down to the compromise, right? Zelensky says, as Trump publicly calls for Ukraine to make concessions in the peace talk, he warned Ukrainians, quote, "will never forgive neither him nor the US for the unilateral withdrawal from Donbas, if it ever has to come to that." This is a Barak Ravid other one. Two sources with knowledge told me negotiations in a political group in Geneva got stuck today. The sources said the reason was the positions presented by the new Russian chief negotiator, Vladimir Medinsky. And this is the idea that he's there just to stall the negotiations. Along with Putin's team, says Jay in Kyiv, Trump tried to overwhelm Ukraine's envoy in Switzerland with his own crew of his most pro-Russian lackeys, including Driscoll, at the last minute. So this is where Dan Driscoll, military man. I don't know that Dan Driscoll is that pro-Russian, to be fair. Nonetheless, now Zelensky wants Europe in ASAP, as it's clear that the US is merely representing the Kremlin. Incredible the level to which the GOP is suiciding the remnants of their reputation. So not happy at all, Jay in Kyiv, with the, and he's an American, with the American approach to negotiations. Now, Dennis Stillerman here, who is the CEO of Firepoint, the company that makes the FP 1, 2, 5, 7, 9, the Flamingo missiles, etc. The delegations from the UK and France joined the talks between Russia, the US, and Ukraine in Geneva without being invited. I think this really messed up the plans to quickly sort everything out behind Europe's back and push for the annexation of Donbas, which is obviously what the US and Russian delegates were planning to do. London and Paris made it clear, no agreements about Europe without Europe. This is an extremely important show of support and a demonstration of their position. Thank you very much. Now, wow. So I don't know what role these guys played, but if they just kind of turned up, if European diplomats have just turned up at the Geneva talks without being invited by the US and obviously by Russia, clearly being invited by Ukraine, this is a show of solidarity. This is like, you ain't talking about Europe without us, guys, and we're here to defend our brother in arms, Zelensky, and the Ukrainians. And good on the Europeans for doing that. I think it's brilliant, but I'd love to know how, exactly what that looked like and in what role they turned up, or whether they can indeed have a role, whether they're actually going to get into a room like the one you see on the right there. Now, Donald Trump is stalling a vote, and this is where you start going, okay, is there compromise on him? Because I mean, all the same conversations we've had for many, many months, right? He is just trying to help out Russia at every conceivable opportunity. The Trump is stalling a vote on a bipartisan bill to ramp up the sanctions on Russia's energy sector. Senator Richard Blumenthal, who introduced the bill with Lindsey Graham, said, quote, "We've been waiting for a green light, and he has been vacillating back and forth so much that anyone watching him has whiplash." The man is never going to sign off that bill, or he's never going to enact that bill. Because remember, the bill, it gives ultimate power to Trump to actually enact those. It gives him the tools to enact sanctions and tariffs and whatnot. So even if he signs it off, it's still on his desk as something that he has unilateral power over utilizing. So Blumenthal here is getting extremely frustrated. I'm sure Lindsey Graham is, but Lindsey Graham cannot show his displeasure towards Trump because otherwise, he'll get thrown under the bus. Now, Representative Don Bacon, the Nebraska Republican, he's very pro-Ukrainian. He has been much more outspoken in his criticism of Trump because he's not running again in November. America should not be threatening our allies. This is dumb. What's he talking about? Well, Julia Ioffe, who's a great analyst, says on Saturday, Senator Lindsey Graham unloaded on the prime ministers of Greenland and Denmark, telling them that if Trump wanted to take Greenland, they'd just have to deal with it. Lots of F-bombs, said one person in attendance. Picture Graham on his worst TV day, said one source. Wow. So Lindsey Graham was going hard at both Denmark and Greenland. This is Ola Jolson from from Greenland. I think he's not Greenish prime minister, he's a senior Greenlandic figure. So new details are emerging about a heated meeting on Saturday afternoon at the Bayerischer Hof Hotel in Munich between several senators and members of Congress and Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, along with Greenland's Premier Jens Frederik Nielsen. It was during this meeting that Senator Lindsey Graham reportedly went completely off the rails. The American outlet Puck had previously described how so-called F-bombs were thrown around the room. The American outlet Puck had, quite imagine Graham on his worst day, a source told Puck, but Berlingske can now reveal that events unfolded even more violently than previously reported, and that Graham's outburst was directed in particular at Mette Frederiksen and Jens Frederik Nielsen. So you've got a US senator going to town, like rhetorically violently attacking two premiers of two country leaders here. Just get in your place, Senator. He called her little lady, a source who was in the room told Berlingske. However, the Prime Minister did not appear affected by what everyone present perceived as extremely degrading and outright sexist. She seemed cool, the source said. When Graham had finished, Frederiksen simply responded, "When you're done with that, the meeting can continue." Earlier, Graham had also stressed to Frederiksen and Nielsen that Donald Trump was the president of the United States and thus the most powerful man in the world. The implication, neither Denmark nor Greenland should believe that they are anything in comparison with the mighty United States. This rant, as a Danish source who was present in the room described it, came across as extremely demeaning toward Denmark and Greenland, particularly after the little lady remark directed at Mette Frederiksen. Graham's behavior was described by a source as outright disturbing, shocking, and extremely inappropriate. An almost theatrical scene also unfolded between Graham and Premier Jens Frederik Nielsen. Quote, Graham yawned directly in his face in a way that could only be interpreted as mocking, the source told Berlingske. It became too much for some of the American participants at the meeting, and Senator Elisa Slotkin, who's a Democrat, was reportedly so shocked that she stood up and left the meeting. In a sense, the meeting marked the culmination of Graham's angry outbursts. Already on Friday, he had stunned observers on live television when asked about Greenland. And I haven't reported this to you, but of course he said this. Who the hell cares who owns Greenland? Graham said, according to C-SPAN. Participants at the meeting described his conduct as completely out of line. According to Berlingska's information, there was quiet speculation afterwards as to whether the senator from South Carolina had lost his composure entirely, whether he was not in his right mind when meeting with the Danish and Greenlandic leaders. Only Graham himself likely knows the answer to that, and that's reported from Berlingske there. Wow. So that is Lindsey Graham losing the plot. Now, just in terms of the whole Donald Trump situation, the Epstein files catastrophe, the ICE catastrophe, the tariff and economic catastrophe that is the Trump administration's policies. This is Sean Ryan. I don't really want to play you all of this. It's over 2 minutes. Sean Ryan is at times the number one podcast in America. It's like Joe Rogan, Sean Ryan, these sort of people who are adjacent to the GOP, but not necessarily actual kind of Republican political podcasts. But he's like a veteran military man. It's a military podcast, and essentially he is advocating for the GOP and for Trump, all the time. And so it becomes a sort of political podcast. And he endorsed, I think, Trump, I presume formally before the November election. And now he's really out for Trump. He's very, very critical. And you're seeing lots of people change their minds. I read someone who's got a huge following today, I forget his name, just saying, I was wrong. I voted for Trump. These are reasons I voted for Trump, and I was wrong. And I'm going to publicly walk it back. And he has publicly walked it back. And he's got a massive following. I forget who he is. But here's Sean Ryan.
I've been pretty quiet about Pam Bondi in front of Congress the other day, talking about how the Dow's up to 50,000. Nobody gives a fuck. Because what you should be talking about is how you are going to investigate and prosecute any pedophiles that were running around on Epstein Island that you're affiliated with. But we didn't talk about that, did we? Oh, and what's the excuse? What was the excuse? Oh, if we prosecute everybody, the whole system would go down. Well, you know what that sounds like? That sounds like how Trump ran his campaign. Let's drain the swamp. Doesn't that sound a lot like draining the swamp? It actually is drain the swamp served up to you on a fucking silver platter. But you're not going to take it, are you? You're going to protect pedophiles. You're going to protect pedophiles rather than go after them and hope that everybody's happy that the Dow hit 50,000. Are you fucking out of your mind? I guess the whole drain the swamp campaign promise was another fucking bullshit lie, huh? Man, the lies are stacking up fast. I've never seen so many fucking lies appear in a year? It's only been a fucking year. Look at all the fucking lies. I wanted to talk to you about something else too. Then you got Pam Bondi and what's that other guy's name? Todd Blanche. Yeah, running around giving Ro Khanna and Massey all this shit because they accidentally put two names that are apparently innocent, out that were in the Epstein files. Well, I got fucking news for you. You have two guys that are in Congress that are actually doing shit, and you give them shit because they made a mistake when they're trying to do the fucking job of the entire Department of Justice, because nobody over there will do their fucking job when it comes to putting pedophiles away in prison. So you give them shit because two people are trying to do the job of the entire Department of Justice. Fuck you. Fuck you.
Okay, sorry for the F-bombs there, but for someone like this to say, I guess the whole drain the swamp campaign promise was another effing bullshit lie. The lies are stacking up fast. I've never seen so many effing lies. If this is what one of your main supporters and disseminators, or at least influencers online, is saying, then actually you're in a spot of bother. And we've got Andrew Schultz here saying very much the same sort of thing, although in slightly different manner. Andrew Schultz, another one of these. There's a bunch of them have this podcast together. He just said that what a lot of people don't want to admit. He says the moment that broke him that what Trump's administration is doing with the ICE is exactly what critics warned about. Institutions didn't hold, the Constitution didn't magically intervene, and the response from Trump and Kash Patel, in his view, validated the warnings in real time. When cultural figures start saying the guardrails failed, that's not fringe talk, that's a warning sign. So you've got two people there, really prominent people, talking in this way, and Joe Rogan similarly, that I think these are barometers that should give the Republican Party pause for thoughts and give them a lot of concern going forward. Now, we're going to come back to the US a bit later, but I'm just going to pop into Europe and talk about populism in a different country. This is German AfD leader Alice Weidel on Ukraine. One must not continue feeding such a regime, but must force a regime like the Ukrainian one to the negotiating table. Force it to the negotiating table. That's what she's saying, as Trump has done. So she's saying, well done, Trump. You forced Ukraine to the negotiating table. That should have been Germany's task as well. So she is very clear on not giving any support for Ukraine if they were to succeed, the AfD. Now, the AfD are looking very good in the polls, and the CDU are very strongly supporting Ukraine at the moment. If that was to happen, I mean, it's a long time till the general elections, but there will be continued sort of provincial elections and whatnot, where AfD, particularly in the east, are looking very strong. It is definitely a worry. Alice Weidel, I think AfD, I think the rise of the populist right in Europe is a massive, massive problem. Now, talking about the populist right in Europe, let's go to Hungary now and Viktor Orban. Now that you have the April elections, where at the moment Tisza are looking like a shoo-in, but a lot can happen when you have Orban probably willing to cheat his way through the election campaign. The European Commission is toning down its criticism of Viktor Orban, and it might even disperse fresh EU funds to the illiberal government ahead of elections, according to the Financial Times. EU officials did not want to be seen as interfering in elections or to give more ammunition to Orban in his anti-Brussels campaign. So if the Europeans just publicly come out, as in the European Commission, European Communion, European Parliament, if they continue to publicly criticize Orban, it could be seen as official election interference. So they're being very careful now about the rhetoric they say from official positions, which is interesting. Now, Gary Kasparov says a few things about this unprecedented disgrace. And this is Marco Rubio getting into bed with with Viktor Orban publicly in Budapest, visiting both Fico and Orban straight away after the Munich Security Conference. Gary Kasparov says, and when Marco Rubio and I talked about this in my last video on Canada, Rubio saying, look, we will, and I think there's been a promise from Trump to Orban that if they are in financial difficulty, that the US will bail them out type thing. And Orban being endorsed by the Trump regime and being told that, look, this is for Rubio said this is for the benefit. Orban winning would be for the benefit of the US, not anyone other than Orban. They only see a kleptocrat pro-Russian winning in Hungary as being positive for the US. Like if a pro-European, pro-Ukrainian, pro-democracy candidate such as Peter Magyar is to win, then that wouldn't be to the benefit of the United States. It's a very, very interesting statement from Rubio, and I think it's deeply problematic. Gary Kasparov responds a few things about this unprecedented disgrace. One, the United States needs nothing from Hungary that would depend on the outcome of this election, but clearly Donald Trump does. Two, weakening Europe is a hobby for MAGA, but an existential necessity for Putin. Rubio is visiting Fico and Orban, who aren't ideologically aligned, but are the most anti-Ukraine, pro-Russian leaders. There is no diplomatic or geopolitical reasoning for the White House to prioritize their success unless directed to do so by the Kremlin. P.S. to those who like Rubio, I supported him in 2016. In contrast to Trump and Vance, or because he can speak diplomatically, he is still a tool of the Trump administration and is advancing its destructive pro-Kremlin agenda. Don't fall for good cop, bad cop. He's endorsing a corrupt thug. To which Michael Weiss, the journalist, says, would add that Magyar would not only normalize Hungary's relationship with the EU, he would be a natural ally to the US, or would have been before the Trump administration opted to align with the corrupt authoritarians chummy with Moscow. Whether Rubio believes what he's saying becomes increasingly irrelevant the more he ventriloquizes his odious master. I love that statement. The more that Rubio ventriloquizes his odious master. And this was election interference, plain and simple. worth seeing that Hungary's standard of living has slipped to the lowest in the EU. The economy has been flat for years. Investment has collapsed. Orban has been wooing China to replace EU funds. The deficit is wide. Public debt is at the highest in the region. Cumulative inflation since 2021 is the highest in EU. It is a basket case. And this is where, other people, some clearly pro-Hungarian commenters are trying to claim, and I've seen this a number of times online, so they're definitely out, these people wanting to sow, I think, disinformation, out trying to say how wonderful Hungary is. And it's like, my goodness, it's not in a good place if you're looking at a lot of the major metrics there. Okay, so no, we don't need to go through that one. Then we're going to go to Georgia very quickly. I spoke to Marika Makiashvili the other day. Go and check out that interview. It was a fantastic interview. She's an absolute wealth of knowledge. In lightning speed of the crackdown on academia. So basically, the Georgian Dream pro-Russian government is cracking down on academia. That's usually the sign of autocracy, and it's indeed what the Trump administration has tried to do. It's what Viktor Orban did in years gone past. The lightning speed of the crackdown on academia continues in Georgia by eliminating most faculties at most state universities with a single decree. For example, the dissent stronghold Ilya State University is only left with STEM and pedagogy programs, but it's not just Ilya. I wonder when they'll extend to private universities with its speed, probably around 4 p.m. tomorrow. So they are cracking down on universities, just gutting them of the sorts of courses and faculties who are who dissent against the Georgian Dream regime there. Now, moving to talk about Europe and this divorce that's ongoing between Europe and the United States, worth mentioning social media and big tech. I've been talking about that a lot. Europeans are trying to replace big tech in Europe. Here's an example of this. Something new is coming for Europeans. It's a social platform built from the EU for the EU. No American tech giants, no data leaving European borders, no algorithmic manipulation. More details dropping in March, but here's what we're building. True data sovereignty, everything hosted on EU servers. Your data never touches American infrastructure. GDPR, which is data protection, isn't an afterthought, it's the foundation. EU access only. IPs from outside the European Union are blocked by default. Exceptions for the Ukraine and UK. I like that. No Russian troll farms, no foreign interference campaigns, a European space for European conversations. Circles. Not everyone deserves the same access to your life. Share with your inner circle, friends, acquaintances, or the public. You decide who sees what. Real life relationships reflected online. Gamification that rewards quality. Points for meaningful engagement, not rage bait. Level up by contributing to conversations, not by dunking on strangers. A system that encourages the behavior we actually want to see. Mandatory ID verification. Polls show Europeans overwhelmingly support verified identities online, not more bot farms. No more anonymous troll accounts. No more foreign interference hiding behind fake profiles. Real people, real conversation, real accountability. Chronological feeds. You see what you follow when they post it. No algorithm deciding what you should think or feel. No engagement bait prioritized over substance. No surveillance advertising. Your conversations aren't products. Your interests aren't for sale. Your DMs aren't training data. European values, European moderation. Built around EU speech standards, transparent policies, accountable to European law, not Silicon Valley shareholders. X had their shot at social media. They chose ads, manipulation, and selling your data to the highest bidder. Time for something different. More information coming in March 2026. I think that sounds pretty interesting. I wonder if it'll work, whether it will get enough take up, and whether how it's going to be monetized. Basically, how, is it going to be an EU thing, therefore they're not so interested in profit, or is it going to be a business and therefore they will need to cover their costs? I don't know. I thought this was interesting. So this is Thierry Breton, who is a big European guy in the European Union. He was given the European of the Year award, and he says, I dedicate this award to Donald Trump, which I thought that was pretty funny because it's, of course, reference to the Nobel Peace Prize being kind of dedicated to Donald Trump because he wanted it so desperately. Anyway, moving on to Canada. I meant to have this in my video earlier on Canada. So Canadian separatists have revealed a jaw-dropping details of secret meetings with Trump teams. So Albertan far-right separatists who want to take Alberta away from it being in Canada Separatists from the Alberta Prosperity Project, APP, say they met 3 times with very, very senior Trump administration officials in 2025, with another meeting being planned. According to the Daily Beast, they discussed switching to the US dollar, border security, taxes and national debt, Alberta's pension system, even creating an independent military. The group insists, we are not advocating for Alberta to become the 51st state. Not in name, but certainly in spirit by the looks of it. Just, if any other country had been involved in meeting with separatists from Canada, it would be outrageous. But because the United States is doing it, they seem to be able to get away with election interference. We've seen it in Argentina, Canada, arguably there. We are seeing it in Europe. Is not good enough. Now, another Canada nugget here that I thought was fascinating, and I don't know what to make of this, other than it is, well, it's very pertinent to the discussion earlier. One of the most unheralded stories of last year was the increase in Canadian exports to the United Kingdom, to the point that Britain has now become Canada's second largest export market, overtaking China. Now, what is going on there? From the Canadian point of view, brilliant. Want to sell stuff to the UK rather than we're struggling with the US. Let's get chummy with the UK and let's be friends. Okay, that's cool. Why is the UK buying all sorts of stuff off Canada? Because it's not like we're going to suddenly buy loads more stuff on top of everything we're buying. So one presumes this is a zero-sum game, okay, where it is a case of like what we're buying off you, we're now no longer buying off someone else. And is this replacing American market with Canadian market? Is this a kind of pointed bit of trade dealing with Canada from the UK's point of view? I don't know. I don't know enough about this. I just read this today, but I'd be very interested to see where that is coming from. What, why we are buying so much off Canada. Canada obviously liking that for sure. Okay. Now, this is a bit that I said was going to be interesting to see, to kind of talk about this idea of political opportunism, the US shooting itself in the foot, trade tariffs and barriers to market entry being something that is pushing all of the countries outside of the US towards each other. Europe, the EU, UK, Canada getting together and also getting closer to China, other nations in Asia, the Indo-Pacific, Australia, Japan, New Zealand. Everyone's feeling the American heat, the Trumpian heat, and everyone's kind of not a big fan and working more closely with everyone else. Okay. Then look at this. China is to scrap tariffs for imports from 53 African countries. Eswatini is the only one not on the list as it maintains diplomatic relations with Taiwan. It's an important step to further increase trade between Beijing and the continent. Why this is very interesting is because, as Miria Drutska explains, the China-Africa trade reached $222 billion in early 2025 and could increase once the tariffs are scrapped. The new trade policy also comes at a time when African countries are increasingly steering away from the US, which imposed steep tariffs on many of them. So all of these countries will have a trade deficit in goods with the United States because one would assume that poorer nations are less likely to buy more stuff off the United States than the United States is going to be buying off them. The whole nature of the Liberation Day tariffs was that Trump or his team just looked in fact, there's argument to say that they asked AI to develop their trade policy. They took the trade deficits or trade surpluses with goods and not services. They ignored services where they often had trade surpluses and looked at all these countries with trade deficits and said, well, we don't want to be buying more from them than we're selling them, even though that's a reflection of how rich you are, right? So we are going to put tariffs on all of these nations, irrespective of the kind of individual nuances and context of these trade relationships. And so they whacked all these very heavy tariffs on everyone oftentimes these countries that would really massively suffer from these trade tariffs. Take Africa, for example. So you're whacking tariffs right across these African nations, and everyone in Africa then gets pissed off with the United States, qua Donald Trump. Donald Trump is just pushing these countries away. And meanwhile, China, with the Belt and Road Initiative, is already in Africa, schmoozing with all the leaders and doing deals and getting roads and airports and ports built and all that kind of stuff. Then Trump puts these tariffs on African nations, and Africa goes, hang on, this sucks. And China comes along and says, all these tariffs we've historically had with you, they're not as high as the American ones. We're going to reduce all of them to nothing. We'll have a free trade agreement with you guys. How do you feel about that? Oh, thank you very much, because we're having to buy all this stuff from the US and it's really expensive. China goes, hey, we can sell you that stuff, but we can sell it to you cheaper. And also, can you be our friends? And also, can we have access to your rare earth metals? And also, can we help influence you geopolitically? And then all that happens here is the US lose again. Like, Trump is just like Trump's foreign policy platform looks pretty much identical as if someone was elected in to be president of the United States, and he said to his vice president and his mates, he said, do you know what? It turns out I really hate my country, America. And do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do all of the things that you would expect someone that hated America would do. I'm going to attack my own population. I'm going to send ICE onto the streets that look like the brown shirts from the 1930s. I'm going to whack trade tariffs on all the people that are friendly with us. And I'm going to be quite nice to Russia, by the way. I'm going to pretend to be horrible to China, but really capitulate to anything they do. And it turns out I'm just going to do everything I can to screw over the United States of America. Yeah, but Donald, aren't you? You're American, aren't you? You're president of America. Aren't you proud to be the president? Aren't you wanting to make the country a better place? Yeah, no, not really. I want to screw it over. And everything I do, it looks no different to if I wanted to screw it over. So actually, that's what I'm trying to do. Because I don't know, Vladimir Putin's got some golden shower tapes on me from Christopher Steele, the Steele dossier. It's all true. Seems it. Like, pretty plausible to me, because everything you're doing, mate, is screwing over your relationships with everyone in the world. Honestly, with everyone in the world, apart from Russia. It's bonkers. And China just goes, thank you very much. We'll help ourselves now. We'll help ourselves. You move aside. We'll then have Africa, and we'll have all of our influence in Africa. I don't know. It's just absolutely incredible. Right. Anyway, that's enough of that neck of the woods. We're going to move on to the UK now, if you don't mind. And we're going to go to Guy Verhofstadt, who was a former Belgian prime minister here, very pro-EU guy. And he's talking about Nigel Farage, who is Reform UK leader. They've just had these big conferences in the UK, which has been looks like loads of money's been pumped into it, just all over our TV and radio. It's like all of our media sources are trying to platform reform. They are trying to be PR for reform at the moment. Anyway, it needs to be understood that reforms still haven't, I think, fully explained their relationship with Russia. Guy Verhofstadt here speaks to LBC Radio and talks of this.
Nigel Farage has said the conflict is because the EU and NATO tried to poke the Russian bear with a stick. What would you say to Mr. Farage?
Well, Mr. Farage, he has said already many things. So I saw him the last years in the European Parliament before Brexit, as you know. He was member of the European Parliament. And there he was all the time defending Putin. I found it a shame. And I'm thinking to Winston Churchill, who had a little bit another opinion about the responsibilities of Britain than Farage colluding with Putin. So it's not
I have
only
to
an
challenge
example
you
of Farage.
Mr. Verhofstadt, in what way did he collude with Putin? I must ask on that one.
Why no? So he was simply defending the positions of Russia and denying, in fact, Ukrainians and Belarus and Georgians and Moldavia to choose their own path to the democracy. But he's not an exception, you know. Every extreme right-wing politician in Europe has one or other link with Russia and with
you
Putin.
once said
Mrs.
that
Le Pen is paid.
Le Pen, Wilders are all cheerleaders. You once described them.
Yeah, cheerleaders and even paid. So a part of the campaign of Mrs. Le Pen in France for the moment is paid by Russian banks who are linked to. So and that's the same for every extreme right-wing leader. Now they are denying it. They have not the guts anymore to talk about Putin and to talk about their links with Putin. Salvini, the leader of the extreme right-wing Lega Nord party in Italy, went even to the border with Poland and Ukraine to show his solidarity. But people knew him there, so they sent him back. In saying, your place is not here. You were colluding with Putin, so your place is not here at the border with Ukraine and Poland.
Absolutely spot on. And I think there's this lack of holding Farage to account. Now, there are things that came out the Epstein files that need to also be investigated. One of them, I did talk about this in a number of my Epstein videos, where it appears that Steve Bannon has been at the heart of meetings in Europe, trying to get the movement going, the network of far-right parties that are kind of pro-authoritarian, it looks, get them together to win and disunite Europe. And I think it's essentially Bannon's worldview is what we see manifested in the Trump administration at the moment. And we see from these emails in the Epstein files and a meeting between Steve Bannon, that video shows a meeting between Bannon and Farage, that there is this real desire to unseat some of these democratically elected leaders. Jacob Rees-Mogg is a British conservative politician. He's now been voted out, but he's waiting in the wings. Put in his first vote of no confidence against Theresa May. So we had the Prime Minister Theresa May, who was replaced by Boris Johnson, just hours before meeting with Johnson, Farage and Steve Bannon. The time and date of this meeting is clearly evident in the Epstein files. I personally think there's much bigger than the Mandelson story. So everyone's been fixating on Peter Mandelson and not really fixating on what we are learning about Steve Bannon and the unseating of, say, Theresa May, having being backstabbed by sort of Boris Johnson coming out and then taking over, and actually that appears to be somewhat masterminded by Bannon, Farage, and Johnson meeting together. And then, anyway, this should be the most important political story at the moment. That it's not shows that the media is part of this treachery. Absolutely fascinating. And then just lots of almost disparate stuff to do with reform here at the moment. Breaking news, the Trump administration has repealed, this is from the 12th, the bedrock scientific finding that greenhouse gases threaten human life and well-being, meaning that the Environmental Protection Agency can no longer regulate them. In other words, that climate change isn't real anymore and we can't regulate against it because we have just repealed the scientific findings. Now, you will see that then be adopted by Reform UK, absolutely 100%. You have seen Farage beat down a female journalist from the Financial Times in one of these kind of rally things today, just like Donald Trump does with female journalists. And it was very kind of had hallmarks. I think they've been looking at how Trump has succeeded and how Trump just goes about doing things, and they're just trying to copy him at the moment. But anyway, you're going to see climate denialism hit the UK. It's been a funny time in the UK because, of course, we had all of that situation with Mandelson. We had people thinking that that Keir Starmer was going to be voted out. He actually came back and fought back fairly well in House of Commons. He's a lot better, Starmer, when he's got fire in his belly and he's got that kind of righteous indignation. Here's an example.
A landslide victory for our government. Only 4 people have ever elected the Labour Party to victory in a general election. I'm one of them. And she talks about numbers. Let us remember, Mr. Speaker, 5 prime ministers, 7 chancellors, 8 home secretaries, 8 foreign secretaries, 16 housing secretaries, all completely useless, all failed Britain, and this prime minister's clearing up the mess. She comes here every week desperately fighting to save her dying party. I'm fighting to change our country. Interest rates down, inflation down, waiting lists down, child poverty down, and I'll tell you another thing's down, the number of Tory MPs.
So that was typically rambunctious, but I thought you did a pretty good job. Here's another example. The reason why I'm showing you these clips is because I'm just going to show you an interesting statistic afterwards. Audio is not very good.
And now we see it with Doyle. Isn't that what a former prosecutor would call an established pattern of behaviour?
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to take no lectures from the Tories. Standards in public life. She defended Partygate for months and months and months. And even now she says it was overblown. The shadow foreign secretary broke the ministerial code by bullying. Boris Johnson kept her. The leader of the opposition promoted her. She sits on her front bench. Her former shadow justice secretary complained about not seeing enough white faces in Birmingham, and she was too weak to sack him for racism.
So anyway, he came out fighting after that in the kind of way that you see, and I think he did a fairly good job at Prime Minister's questions there. Now, the reason I say this is because a weird thing happened, that he went through that. I mean, he's got terrible favorability ratings, but they actually went up 10 after he had the most difficult week of his political life. So there's a weird thing that went on there, and it's going to be interesting to see how how the stats go in the UK. Reform were odds-on favourite to win the next election. Okay, it's a long way away, but now they're no longer the bookies' favourite, and most polls have them now. Labour is within sort of 5 of Reform, so it's still amazing that Reform are as they are as popular as they are, but things are closing. It's looking very interesting politically speaking at the moment in the UK. But this is moving on to talk about things that then track back to Europe, to Ukraine, to our normal geopolitical conversations. The UK government, now that he's kind of got over that explosion that has happened, what we want to see from our government in the UK is getting on and doing things that are really important with regard to domestically in our country, but also with regard to internationally. And there's some interesting stuff coming out. So the UK government is considering raising defence spending to 3% of GDP earlier than planned, potentially by 2029, according to the BBC. Starmer had previously promised to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027, with an ambition to reach 3% in the next parliament, so after 2029. But it could be by 2029. So that would be interesting. I keep talking about how some of these countries like Germany, like possibly Canada as well, UK, I think as well, are using defense spending as an economic stimulus to kickstart the economy. But in fact, should we go? No, this is probably a good segue back into some other stuff. Yeah, we will talk about this now. So going back to Reform before we then go back to what British Parliament is doing to do with foreign influence. This guy, Matt Goodwin, is a Reform candidate that's running in this by-election in Manchester, which is going to be a real barometer for what's going on. It's the Gorton and Denton by-election, which is somewhere where actually at the moment it's a Labour stronghold. Labour should win it, but everything that's happened means that their PR at the moment is in tatters. Greens could win it as they've got quite a strong candidate, and then Reform have this very famous Reform guy, Matt Goodwin, who's running, but he's also pretty controversial, very divisive. He's previously slagged off Manchester, and now he's kind of running for a seat in Manchester. But we hear that the Reform candidate at this month's by-election claims he wants to put Britain first, but he's still on the payroll of Viktor Orban's far-right propaganda unit. What the hell? So anyway, the Good Law Project has written that Orban's paychecks reform candidate is fueled by profits from Russian oil. Matt Goodwin, the GB News presenter, standing by for Reform UK in this month's Gorton and Denton by-election, says he wants his country back, but Good Law Project can reveal that he received a salary of up to €10,000 a month from a far-right pressure group based in Hungary. Goodwin has been speaking at Matthias Corvinus Collegium MCC events since 2024 and seems to have served as a visiting fellow since at least last summer, when he returned to Budapest in August to speak at a panel moderated by the British anti-trans commentator Joanna Williams. According to leaked documents obtained by Direct 36, visiting fellows are paid between €5,000 and €10,000 a month, plus housing, office space, health insurance, and where appropriate, family support. Fellowship ranges from 2 weeks a year, but Direct 36 found that it's common for fellows to continue on a retainer. The investigation also found one-off guest speakers from abroad are paid handsomely. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's son was paid €7,000 for a 2-hour panel discussion. So anyway, so on and so forth. Like, this is the sort of stuff that should be in the news, right? The connections between a reform candidate for member of parliament connected to Viktor Orban and nefarious sort of monies coming from Eastern Europe. Like, this is absolutely not good enough, and yet we are fixating on trying to destroy Keir Starmer when Reform UK are just connected root and branch, it seems, to dodgy money and dodgy influence from abroad. Now, talking about money from abroad, billionaire Elon Musk has held private discussions with allies about removing British Prime Minister Keir Starmer from his position before the next general election, according to the Financial Times. Musk examines how to oust Starmer as UK Prime Minister before the next election. So we are getting this influence from abroad, as we saw with Bannon, as we saw, from the Epstein files. Elon Musk is taking that torch and he's running with it. This kind of influence is absolutely unacceptable in my books. I just seen if I've got an archive version of the article from the Financial Times. No, it's not archived at the moment. I'll see if I can archive it to see if we can access that, or if anyone else has previously archived it. Sometimes is the case. If not, we'll move on, because there's more on essentially what we don't want is foreign influence in UK politics. Yes, it was archived previously. Excellent. Okay, so Musk examines how to oust Starmer as UK Prime Minister before the next election. So Musk, the world's richest man and key confidant of US President-elect Donald Trump, is probing how he and his right-wing allies can destabilize the UK Labour government. Beyond the aggressive posts he has issued on his social media platform X, the People said, his view is that Western civilization itself is threatened. One of the people briefed on the matter. We don't know who these people are, so take it all with a pinch of salt, of course, but this seems entirely Muskian. Musk has sought information about whether it might be possible to build support for alternative British political movements, notably the right-wing Populist Reform UK Party. Now, it's worth throwing some extra detail into this. So if you didn't know, in UK, Reform UK are a right-wing populist party. There's also Advance UK, and there's also a new party that is being set up by Rupert Lowe. Now, Rupert Lowe is a former owner of Southampton Football Club. I say that as a Pompey fan. So Rupert Lowe then became an MP for Reform, but then he got kicked out of Reform because he had an argument with Nigel Farage, and it all got very heated. So he's starting up this new party, and there are some claims that they could split the Reform vote quite seriously, because they're even more extreme than Reform. If you follow Rupert Lowe on Twitter, he is horrific, right? He is just coming out. He's out Farage, but Elon Musk has essentially endorsed him. So Elon Musk over the last few days has been reposting Rupert Lowe stuff and has been shouting about Rupert Lowe. So this is exactly what the Financial Times article is talking about. Musk has sought information about whether it might be possible to build support for alternative British political movements. The problem is these are quite extreme movements, right? Reform has tried to make itself much more populist, as in much more popular, and he'd be better off supporting Reform, but it seems that he doesn't like Nigel Farage anymore, Elon Musk, because Nigel Farage wouldn't get together with Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson, Nigel Farage has long said, is too divisive. You can't win elections if you're going to be championing Tommy Robinson. Farage is clever enough to know that. But Musk is just too extreme to be bothered with that. He had championed Tommy Robinson because basically Elon Musk, I think, is pretty white supremacist. But Musk is looking to Rupert Lowe. So anyway, this is all very worrying. This is a case of foreign influence in our elections. We have Elon Musk really seeking to go to town in trying to influence the election in the next general election. Now, another article in the Financial Times says the UK, and this is something that I can't believe hasn't already happened, but the UK is to ban political party donations from foreign-owned companies, right? As part of this, they need to make sure that the election, the Labour government, in fact, the Parliament as a whole, because most parties should be behind this, there needs to be an attempt to stop foreign interference in UK politics. We've not had to put things in place before because no one's been so overt in trying to do this. And we kind of got away with just the norms of political mechanics over our political history. But now the money flows around all over the shop, and you've got bloody Bitcoin and crypto and all this kind of stuff. It's just very easy to financially influence politics, I think, a lot easier than it ever used to be. And so we need to start putting things in place, and it's long overdue. Now, I'm going to just talk a tiny bit about Brexit because it's being mentioned more and more in the UK, partly because the UK is trying to get closer to Europe. People are working out what's going to go on in the next election, whether Brexit is going to be kind of rerun, irrespective of whether Europe would have us back, irrespective about rejoining, but just the idea that Brexit itself is becoming is more and more recognized that it's unpopular as a decision that we collectively made. New data shows Brexit has lowered UK GDP by 6 to 8% over the past decade, and investment is down 12 to 18%, employment down 3 to 4%. It's even worse than economists had predicted pre-referendum, because they thought there would be a bounce back long term, but it hasn't really happened. So this is coming from the CEPR. Economists were roughly right on the magnitude of the impact, but wrong on the timing. These consensus pre-referendum forecast of a 4% long-run GDP loss turned out to be close to the actual loss after 5 years, but too optimistic about the longer run. So in other words, there's a kind of longer run malaise in UK economics that I mean, everyone was talking doom and gloom from the Remain side during the Brexit election. They got the timing wrong. The doom and gloom was right, but it just happened many years later, not least because Brexit didn't really even start happening until after 2020. The vote took place in 2016. We actually removed ourselves from Europe after 2020, right? So it took a long time to actually get the divorce. Now, interesting data, it's nearly a decade since the Brexit vote, and since then around 5 million voters have died. And this is really important. This is often predicted to be the case. People have been saying we're waiting for a lot of the Brexit voters to die, knowing that younger people are much more likely to be pro-European. So 5 million voters have died, and 6 million people have come onto the voting register or come to voting age. Keir Starmers called for deeper links to the EU in his speech at the Munich Security Conference, and the latest YouGov data shows 62% of Brits want a closer relationship with the EU, 54% want to rejoin. I mean, wow. So that's pretty big statistics going on there. Right. And then we have arguments like this. So this is Jacob Rees-Mogg, if you know him. He's like, ugh. But anyway, this is his younger sister on Jeremy Wright. And I love interactions like this. I'm going to play this out just so I can have a glug of wine. But this is the Jeremy Vine show.
I keep reading that since Brexit, we've got poorer. And since Brexit, we have lost money we would have made trading with the EU had we been in the EU. What am I missing there?
You are missing the fact that they have made projections in the way the OBR does that bear no reality. Nothing's
so those
reality.
Are official figures.
And
Brexit reduced UK GDP by 6% to 8%.
It is a projection of what we might have grown by had we not left.
From the scripts here, we're actually in the same ballpark. You just don't believe it.
No, they're just made up figures.
I think we almost sort of need to suspend what happened in 2016.
So the idea is that if you just give me figures, I can just say I don't believe them. I don't believe those figures. Yeah, I don't believe them. No, but literally, like, look at the state of the economy now, and look at where it was, and look at what these economists are saying. No, I don't believe them. Like, well, okay, well, what would it take you to believe them? I mean, what if they're true? You're not believing them out of ideology. You're prima facie denying them their truth. There's no justification for that other than you don't like the sound of them. But this is what people are doing, and it's really, really frustrating.
We felt about it then, and consider where we are and what the last decade, and in particular the last sort of 5-6 years, have been. I think so. There's a to pick up on the points you make, I suppose. You talk about us doing more trade with the rest of the world, which is true, but that trade is, I mean, effectively a negligible impact on the UK economy. I mean, the trade deal with Australia and New Zealand, for example, the trade that we do with the rest of the world is negligible. Actually, there are some arguments that suggest that it may have even had a negative impact and a negative effect. We've lost around 15 to 20% of trade with the European Union, and that has cost us perhaps to the tune of about 1 or 2%, maybe even up to 3%.
That's not what the figures show.
It is up to maybe 3% of GDP, which, by the way, at a time when we are struggling for growth, would be huge. Just another key point to make, though, by the way, which is that one of the sort of fundamental flaws of the argument that it makes us more agile and able to trade with the rest of the world is that we still do trade with the European Union, now just with more friction. And that means that businesses have to still meet EU regulations. We are currently in the worst of all worlds, which is where businesses, and you're talking about business as a whole, the biggest and most profitable business in the United Kingdom, the ones that sort of make the most significant economic contribution, do trade into that. Hang on a minute, let me finish. They do trade into that massive market, and they have to abide by EU regulations. They are burdened by the current relationship with the EU. Just on the issue about research and tech, and in particular agriculture, those industries have been absolutely hammered by loss of subsidies and loss of investment from the European Union. Our university sector is practically on its knees because of it. And I mean, because you're well connected to Somerset, you know how furious the agricultural industry are by the way in which Brexit
the Labour government has scrapped the subsidies, but we're there to replace the European ones.
It's got absolutely nothing to do with that.
I keep reading. Look, I keep.
So it's all the Labour government that have been in charge for a year. That our GDP is down, like, historically since Brexit. It's just like it just frustrates me that these people are so impervious to any kind of, I think, rational criticism of their position. But anyway, one thing that we're seeing, and I talked about this in the previous video, is that, like the Europeans, the UK banking sector is also looking at making plans for an alternative to Visa and MasterCard, driven by rising concern that the UK is too dependent on US-owned card networks for everyday payments, according to reporting in The Guardian. The first meeting is due this week and will be chaired by Barclays UK chief Vim Maru, bringing together major financial institutions and funders to discuss how to structure and finance a new industry-led payments company referred to as Delivery Co. The push has gained urgency amid geopolitical risk and fears that access to US-controlled payment rails could become a point of pressure at a time when Visa and MasterCard account for an overwhelming majority of UK card transactions and cash use continues to fall. The initiative is expected to aim for a system that improves resilience and increases competition, with a long runway that could see an operational alternative later this decade. Now, the Europeans are already doing that. Actually, the Europeans, I think we in the UK are very reliant on American tech, whereas Europeans are actually ahead of the game with regard to payments. There are quite a few different payment systems going on in Europe at the moment. So I think that's an interesting thing. I think it's a very important area that the UK really needs to kind of get its act together, because we're behind the curve there. So just a little bit more on where are we at the moment? Okay, a little bit more on reform, since I'm in that kind of mood. So reform came into a local, they won a whole bunch of local council elections in May of this year, and they took control of a number of different councils, big kind of county councils, like Kent, like Durham, like Northumberland, I think is it Leicestershire as well, maybe Nottinghamshire possibly. Anyway, either they took control of all of them or almost in control, and they made these huge promises. One, that they were going to literally do Doge, so they're going to go in and do exactly what, because reform are no different to MAGA, really. So it's like, oh, Elon Musk has done that in the United States. We're going to do that in Kent County Council. So we're going to go in Doge. We're going to go and Doge the council, and we're going to find all of these areas that the council is wastefully spending our taxpayer monies. And it turns out they couldn't do that. The councils are strapped for cash, and they're absolutely financially buggered, and they are scraping everything they can together. And there isn't the wastage that people think there is intuitively in government spending is all wasteful. So they've gone into all these councils. They've found absolutely freaking nothing. They've made up a bunch of stuff. They've made massive claims of successes that were things that were already put in place anyway. It's just been the whole thing's been, I think, pretty embarrassing. But the problem is, not enough people around Britain know that these council elections have led to reform councils that have been outright crap. And we'll just get to local elections in May this year, and we'll do the same thing again. And we'll get even more reform. Reform will absolutely romp in the local elections, and we'll have loads of councils run by people that don't know what the frick they're doing and making all the mistakes that they made in all these councils, and we haven't learnt. Its flagship Doge unit at Kent County Council, designed to uncover waste, failed to uncover major savings. Quote, we made some assumptions that we would come in here and find some of the craziness that Doge found in America, and that was wrong. Well, I'm glad you admitted that. They've also said that they were going to have council tax lowered in all these councils, and they've ended up hiring council tax in every single council. So it's just like, we're not only not going to save you money, we're going to actually cost you more money. Absolutely ridiculous. Now, Nigel Farage seems to get away with it, but it's about time he gets his feet held to the coals. This is at least a little example of this.
So Jim Ratcliffe himself is an
So to let you know what happened here, Jim Ratcliffe was this pro-reform guy, the owner of Manchester United Football Club. He came out and said, we're being colonized by migrants. And he was all like anti-migrant, and yet he is an economic migrant. He didn't want to pay tax in the UK, so he moved to Monaco. Monaco has a non-Monaco inhabitants of 75% non-indigenous. So 75% of Monaco citizens are not from Monaco, right? And so Jim Ratcliffe is one of them. So he's slagging off migrants in the UK, and the UK being colonized by migrants. Economic migrants, people that come over here for their welfare or whatever, while he's like not paying tax into the UK and goes to Monaco, so he saves 4 billion quid tax. It's like, okay, fair enough, but I don't think you should have the right to slag off the UK then, if you, and migrants, if you're going to be an economic migrant and sodding off, you know, this country that's given you the opportunities and the essentially the platform to make that money, and you're like, yeah, and now I don't want to pay back into that. I want to just go to Monaco instead and make even more money. Yay, billionaires! I love a billionaire. So Britain's richest man can feck off, as far as I'm concerned.
So Jim Ratcliffe himself is an economic migrant, isn't he? He lives in Monaco. Should he speak French or Monegasque living there?
He would probably argue that he's a refugee from the British tax system, but that's a separate...
I hate Nigel Farage. I hate him. The way he laughs here, I just hate him. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I hate him.
He lives in Monaco. Should he speak French or Monegasque living there?
He would probably argue that he's a refugee from the British tax system, but that's a separate debate.
But he's an economic migrant, isn't he?
Monaco is a...
Is he an economic migrant, yes or no?
He's a tax migrant.
He's an economic migrant then, isn't he?
Yes, he is, but you know what? He's not claiming Social Security.
But he's
not claiming Social Security.
He's not paying taxes that could go on people's benefits.
Nobody's spending lots of money in Monaco, employing people and spending money at the high school.
Well, he's actually Nigel Farage. He's cut hundreds of jobs here in the UK, in Grangemouth. So Jim Ratcliffe.
So he's cutting jobs in the UK, not paying tax in the UK, and spending his money in Monaco. And by the way, do you want me to show you the data on migrants and net contributors to society? Interesting, in the United States, Cato Institute, a libertarian institute, have just produced more data to show that these kind of economic migrants that he's talking about, or migrants he's talking about, end up being net contributors to the tax coffers, so they don't generally claim on the welfare to the degree that you are trying to claim here. So anyway, just Nigel Farage, but he gets this real leg up by our media. This is BBC Question Time. I've shown you this before. This is the flagship political show on BBC, and this is from between 2010 and 2019, but around, say, the Brexit time. And these were members of European Parliament when we had MEPs. We don't anymore. The number of times that MEPs from these different parties were on the panel on BBC Question Time. So 45 MEPs from UKIP who were anti-EU, 3 Conservative who were broadly anti-EU, 2 Brexit Party who were anti-EU. So 50 MEPs, 0 MEPs from Labour, 0 MEPs from Lib Dem, 0 MEPs from SNP, Green or Plaid Cymru. So the platform being given is just outrageous. And, you know, Reform are always on BBC Question Time. I just saw a clip of Zia Yusuf on last night's BBC Question Time because, of course, he's been on 6 times in the past 4 months. He launched into a smug tirade about Starmer's connection to Epstein via Mandelson and how he should resign. Anyway, I'd love a comment from him about the party treasurer, Nick Candy, a Reform treasurer, a man who appears in the Epstein files on tens of occasions and had close personal relationships with Sarah Kellen and Ghislaine Maxwell. Zia, are you now, by your own logic, calling for the resignation of Nigel Farage because he had direct communications with several Epstein connections? There's 5 in my article that donated to Reform within the last year alone. Anywho's, if anyone does fancy punting this over to the petulant man-child that is Yusuf, I'd be genuinely grateful. So, you know, the hypocrisy from Reform, but also the platforming from our own channels like the BBC. And I'm a big fan of the BBC, but they are just promoting Reform like they did again today. And they showed this. I actually sent in an official complaint to the BBC because they had this 1-hour promo of Reform the other day. Laura Kunsberg, you know, talking about Reform ready to be elected, and they just basically gave a 1-hour documentary on Reform that they haven't done for any other political party, just Reform. The problem with Laura Kunsberg's documentary about Reform on BBC Two is it's not being broadcast as Kunsberg claims at the start, but that Kunsberg allows Nigel Farage, his leadership cabal, his councillors and supporters to make up ridiculous and easily debunked claims and lies about his support for the far-right grifters responsible for the Razor Colours, the United Kingdom flag, then the flag march, the flag rising crime in London, the Farage riots, the number of extremists in Reform, the rises in council tax in councils controlled by Reform, immigration which is falling and not rising. Further, Kunsberg does not question Farage about his support for Putin, Trump and Tate, and his links to the US Heritage Foundation, who wrote the Project 2025 blueprint, and Reform's links to Turning Point UK. Question Farage about the motivation of the super rich making huge donations to Reform. Are searching questions of Farage's similarities to other fascists, both modern and contemporary, in creating scapegoats for ignorant people to kick and blame for their woes. Question Farage the consequences of leaving the European Court of Human Rights and his true motivation for wanting to do so. Ask Farage about the fact that he described himself as a wrecker. Question the real motivation of former senior conservatives who have defected to Reform. So there's no proper challenging of these people, and we are just giving them an easy route to number 10, possibly, unless we wise up in the UK. So it's definitely a worry. You see this with AfD in Germany. We've seen it with Viktor Orban in Hungary. Is that the direction we want to go in? Because I don't see Nigel Farage any different from Viktor Orban. I really do not. Or from Donald Trump. And the corruption and grift in the United States is off the charts. That is, Nigel Farage is earning over £1 million outside of his job at the moment. He's already grifting. Like, the guy is just a grifter. So anyway, there you go. And it was funny that they've picked up all these MPs from the Conservatives, and they went for this vote the other day against the 2-child benefit cap. And these 2 new big ones, big hitters, Robert Jenrick being one of them, and Suella Braverman, the other one, accidentally voted the wrong way. They're so clueless that they voted against the thing that they were campaigning for, or voted for the thing they were campaigning against. But of course, someone who wasn't there is Nigel Farage, because he never turns up to vote, which is exactly what he did when he was in the European Parliament. Anyway, that's enough on British politics. Let's get to seeing some of your comments and super chats and all that kind of stuff. I'll see if we've got time for a little bit more on US politics, as I've got an awful lot to talk about there. Goose Springsteen, did you see Labour conceded that all the local elections will go forward as postponing wasn't legally defensible? Labour have a knack of taking the flak for contentious decisions before backing down. I did a video on this. Sorry, this is very British politics centric, but I did a video on this recently to say that we were going to turn the two-tier local government system where we have, for example, I live in a place where you have Fareham Borough Council and then you have Hampshire County Council. You've got two tiers. You're not quite sure which each council does. I've got a big Budley at the end of my garden. I need it cut down. It's not in my garden. It's on a pathway behind my garden. It all comes over my fence, so I have to cut it down. Then I don't know what to do with the cuttings and whatever. So I phone up Fareham Borough Council and they say, "Oh yeah, no, that's not our pathway. It's Hampshire County Council's pathway." And I'm like, "Really? Okay." Phone up Hampshire, and then anyway, we've got this two-tier system where you've got two levels of council that are doing the same kind of thing, and it's just not very efficient. So we're having reforms at local government level, which is a very good thing. And what they're doing is they're getting rid of this two-tier system and having what are called unitary authorities. Now, in order to do that, you're then having to reform local councillors. So there's no point, if you're going to merge a borough council in with a county council, there's no point having your borough elections if, like, 9 months later, that their position won't exist anymore. So you're going to spend 250,000 quid, say, next to council, voting people in, like having all these elections, putting them on. The council spends £250,000. Then you have these elections, and then 6-9 months later, those people don't have positions. So they're not having a 4-year cycle, they're having a 9-month cycle. So they're saying, we'll give you the choice. So the way that this is phrased, of course, is thoroughly problematic, because this is phrased poorly in the British media by the BBC as well, saying Labour have cancelled. Labour never put this on local councils. Labour the government gave the councils the option of voting themselves as to whether they postpone elections. So the central government didn't dictate anything. So first of all, we need to be careful how we phrase this. And the media have got that really wrong. And they're claiming now the central government's backed down. Well, actually, they didn't enforce this. They said you can vote on whether, and it turns out that Tory councillors voted for this as much as Labour councillors, right? And in fact, more Tory councillors would have had their tenure extended by postponing elections, right? And postponing elections saved money, and it saved an awful lot of hassle, and it just made a lot of sense, right? But people are talking about this being anti-democratic. Anyway, because there might have also been some other reasoning why you might want to postpone elections, because reform doing really well. So also, we don't want reform to get in, so we'll vote to postpone our elections in the local council. Could have been something that people were thinking about. So reform have challenged this in court, and because it's looking like legally they might win that, the central government went, okay, we won't do this thing. So now they're going to have to waste loads of money having elections to elect people in for like 6 months, 9 months or whatever, and then get rid of them because their positions won't exist. So well done, reform. Reform are then saying, look, we're champions of democracy. We've stopped this dictatorial Labour government from doing this, but it's all just a crock of shite. And if Goose Springsteen, honestly, Goose, if you're going to champion this as well done reform, I just think you're onto hiding to nothing there, because I think there was justification for the government to do that. Whether it's technically not legally defensible due to things that are put in place, I don't know enough about that, but it's practically sensible, and those elections shouldn't really take place because you're just completely reforming the councils. It's just a waste of money at a time when our councils are absolutely struggling for money, and you're saying, and now you have to spend £250,000 on an election that's basically pointless. Well done you. So anyway, I just think, whatever. Not whatever. I'm not dismissing. I just that somewhat annoys me. Kevin Forst, thank you for your ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thanks, dude. A good response from Who's Popping in chat to Goose. Tory, yeah, and it's true, by the way. And if you're, although this was to do with COVID, the Tories did postpone elections in 2021 as well themselves. So, you know, there's obviously some basis, some legal precedent for it. And no one said a word then. I guess it was COVID. Alpha Chad Games just finished work, sat down with a cider, and found you're doing a live. Just need to say, Trump's a knob. I haven't read this. Trump's a knob. Yes. MAGA are all PDFs. Roll on the midterms. Indeed, I don't disagree with that. Putin puppet. Epstein, Putin, Trump, mob, network equals the far right. Connect by Bannon, Susan Gordon in the EU, etc. Should be investigated. Trump is penny wise, pound foolish. I think all of these people should be investigated. And there is, I think, a growing move in the UK to sort of investigate Russian influence in UK politics. And I think our government needs to be really ballsy at the moment and just say, right, no money. You know, they've got a big mandate. They've got a big advantage in Parliament. They have a big majority. They should just put things in place so that our politics is as clean as possible. I also think they should reform our political mechanisms to have to get rid of first past the post and have proportional representation. But there you go. Russian paid propaganda, BBC says, Putin puppet. Well, I don't think it's that, but I think they're trying to be, we know that the BBC is trying to win back reform voters. We know that license fee payers are dropping. People are refusing to pay BBC license. We got a lot of reform voters, particularly saying, you know, they're but I don't think you're ever going to win them back. So, yeah, I don't know that trying to appease them by platforming reform consistently is ever going to really do the job there. But Putin puppet, thank you again. Putin's dollars, Orban, heritage, US, EU, and worldwide. I wrote what I thought was a really good feature article for Only Sky. Only Sky went under. I've got it on my own website now, so I can still link it to you. But it was a really good feature article talking about the money going from Putin to Heritage Foundation into American politics through Orban and CPAC. And yeah, it's definitely a problem. The Weasel, nice one, JP. Hi, all about an hour behind on 1.5 times speed. Come on, Ukraine. Thank you very much, Weasel. And thank you, Michael Viewchart, for gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. I'm still wearing your t-shirt, mate. Thank you for that. Very kind. And thanks, Michael, again. Putin puppet, where the far right gains Russian incompetence appears. Yep, I wouldn't disagree there either. Right, okay. So thank you very much for still being here, those of you who still are. I've done a lot of talking about UK politics, but this is getting a whole bunch of stuff that has been waiting for me to talk about out of the way. I just want to just highlight something that is relatively new to the channel and new to YouTube, actually, which is hyping videos. I don't know much about this, but it is it seems very inconsistent. Some people complaining that my videos didn't have hyping for ages and then suddenly did. What had I done? We hadn't done anything. It's just, I think, really hit and miss. There are lives you can't hype a live, and if it's a live that then goes like to a normal video like this will be tomorrow, right, you won't be able to hype it. If you have too many subscribers, you can't hype like big channels. You can't hype something that's over 3 months old, is it, or 7 weeks, or there's some kind of time limit, and you can't hype it. There are loads of reasons why you can't hype things. But hopefully you should be able to hype most of my stuff. Simpty Fool says, JP, I've managed to hype 3 uploads so far. This is the first time this option's been available on your content. Don't forget to talk about it when you do the content housework. Liking and subscribing, reminder, it's only accessible from the YouTube phone app. To access it, you swipe left on the add comment bar underneath the content when the phone is in the portrait orientation. So there you go. If you don't know how to hype, that's how to do it. You won't be able to do it to this video, but please do so on my other ones, because I don't know, it's cool or something. I can get up the hype charts, or I don't know. But please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for all of those who do all of these things. You are truly great people. Okay, what else do we have? Let's go through a few areas of worry. start with Donald Trump himself. Let's listen to a bit of. I haven't heard Donald for a few days. Let's play him.
Will you trust the results of the midterms if Republicans lose control of Congress?
I will, if the elections are honest. Look, I want the last one that wants to complain.
I will trust the midterms if they're honest.
I just had a great election. They say one of the greatest elections, you will agree, ever. Won all 7 swing states. Won 84% of the counties in America. That's why the map is all red. We just had a great election. I believe there was cheating. I think there was cheating.
Well, speaking of counties, what are you doing in Fulton County?
It was too big to read.
Speaking of counties, what is happening?
So, yeah, I will be fine with the election results if there's no cheating. But if there's cheating, and I get to define what cheating is, then yeah, I'll have a problem with them.
Essentially, the lawsuit's been won.
So this is Donald Trump, I think, suing the American government for, what is it, 10 billion or whatever crazy amount of money. He's suing the American government.
Essentially, the lawsuit's been won. I guess I won a lot of money.
How would this work, though? Scott Bessent's the head of the IRS. Pam Bondi's the head of the Justice Department. They're going to defend the IRS against you. You're their boss.
Well, there's never been anything like it, in all fairness.
So are you going to tell them to pay you?
Don't forget, I sued as a private citizen because I sued between terms. I won 3 times. I won 3 times, but I didn't assume, unfortunately for this country, I didn't assume office the second time. But here's the story. I sued because they broke into Mar-a-Lago. That was before I became president. Now it goes along, and it turned out that the suit is a very strong suit.
You're going to tell them to pay you, though? You're the boss.
Well, what I would do, tell them to pay me, but I'll give 100% of the money to charity. I don't want any of the money.
You take it out of the system. A couple more questions here.
No.
I love it. Yeah, you take it out of the system. You give it to charity, but you're taking 10 billion spondoolies out of the US welfare state or whatever, out of whatever you want to spend it on as a government. Yeah, but I give it to charity. So you're forcing the government to spend 10 billion on charity.
I'm putting it back into the system.
Yeah.
If I give money to American Cancer Society, I will give 100% of the money away to charity. I don't want any of it.
$30 trillion debt, and we're going to take 10 billion out of the system?
Well, I mean, you give it away anyway. They give away a lot of money.
Your endorsement.
I'll tell you what, speaking about that, Minnesota and these other states, we have massive investigations going into fraud.
Yeah.
Do you know, if we captured 50% of the fraud of this country right now, we would have better than a balanced budget. And you got to mention that Minnesota, $19 billion in fraud that we.
Oh, dear me. But just in case that wasn't enough for you, hey, should we hear a little bit more?
Tens of thousands. It's bad. I hate it.
Let's listen to more Trump because, you know,
I hate
we're here
even
for
talking about it. 2 people out of tens of thousands, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And you get bad publicity.
He's talking about 2 people getting shot by ICE. 2 people shot out of tens of thousands, so you get bad publicity. I mean, how unfair is that? I mean, we go and murder 2 innocent civilians and we get bad publicity. I mean, just that's so unfair. It's so unfair.
Bad. I hate it. I hate even talking about it. 2 people out of tens of thousands, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And you get bad publicity. Nobody talks about all of the murderers that were taken out of our country. They don't talk about.
But it was 2 Americans.
They don't talk
who died,
about. We have the smallest trucks. As an example, we've been very tough on the waters, and soon, you know, pretty much overall. But if you look at the waters where we knock out boats, it's bad.
Just the way he talks. I love the way the interviewer goes. You've been very tough on the waters. Like, we know what he means, right? Because our brains have to do a bit of mental gymnastics, right? And so we kind of end up forgiving him. But it's ridiculous that our brains actually have to do that. And we sane wash him ourselves in live time, right? So you listen to that and your brain like does a couple of jumps. He goes, oh, right, he's talking about the strikes on the Venezuelan boats. The illegal strikes on the Venezuelan boats that blew up loads of people. But we are very tough on the waters, right? I get what you mean. What do you mean you're tough on the waters? Just honestly, he's such a clown. But I like listening to clowns sometimes. I don't get to go to the circus anymore, so let's see it on national TV in primetime news channels.
Why would anybody be upset that they went in and they got the ballots? I guess, right? Yeah. Again, they did this.
Fulton
That's
County,
been under
Georgia.
review and under investigation for 4 years, and now they got a court order. They got a court order signed by
But nobody knows what
a
the evidence
respected but
is.
liberal judge signed a court order allowing them to go in and pick them up. Well, you're going to know what the ballots say because they're right now inspecting the ballot. I'm not involved in it, but they are inspecting and checking the ballot.
Why is Tulsi Gabbard there?
I don't know, but a lot of the cheating comes from it's international cheating. You have people, they say, from China.
You put this on
let me ask
Truth
you, do
Social.
you think China tries to influence our election?
We know that foreign governments try to influence a lot of things in this country.
Therefore, she's foreign government.
But you tweeted out some theories about Italians and satellites. I mean, do you believe that stuff?
No, I didn't cheat. I sometimes will read truth.
Yeah,
I'll read truth. But
that little bit there should he. So is it Tom Lamas or Yamas? He should have gone to town on that, which is like, if you can't, like he said, you tweeted out, you truthed out this. He said, no, sometimes I retruth it. Yeah, but that's advocacy for that. That means you agree with this point. You don't retweet it if you think it's abject nonsense. Like, I'm sorry, you can't get out of jail free. You can't play a get out of jail free card here by just saying, yeah, I didn't tweet it myself, I retweeted it. I didn't truth it myself, I retruthed it. That really needs to be challenged. That means you advocate it. And if you're advocating these crazy conspiracy theories, then what the hell, mate? You sort yourself out.
You tweeted out some theories about Italians and satellites. I mean, do you believe that stuff?
No, I didn't cheat. I sometimes will read truth.
Yeah,
I'll read truth. Okay. But let me ask you this. If China or any of these countries are involved in our elections, that would bring her into it. And everybody knows that Russia, they talked about Russia, it turned out to be a hoax. It was
no, it wasn't
Hunter
a hoax.
Biden. It wasn't Russia.
It wasn't Hunter Biden. What are you talking about? The Mueller report clearly concluded that there was Russian influence in the American election. What it couldn't show is that there was collusion between you and the Russians to manipulate the election to your benefit. They couldn't prove that because they didn't have the tools to do that, because, partly they'd have to fully investigate you and, et cetera, et cetera. But they couldn't prove collusion, but he clearly said you should go and read the freaking report yourself, mate, that there was Russian influence, huge Russian influence. So, like, the idea that it's a Russia hoax is itself a hoax.
Look, we have to have honest elections.
Yeah.
There should be nothing wrong with the fact that they went in, got ballots from a while ago, and they're going to look at them. And now they're going to find out the true winner of that state. Yeah. And you know what? If there was cheating, which there was, but if there was cheating, it should be found, because we can't let it happen again.
Okay, last one, guys. I promise, last one. Here is.
I mean, we're going to get to the economy later, but
here's my favorite. Here's my favorite manga Mussolini.
I'm starting to get great polls on the economy, which I think
the polls on the economy aren't they're not great.
They should be great.
They should be. So why aren't they? If you believe that,
I don't know. I mean, look,
honestly, I just want to. I have to refresh that because it won't let me pause it or stop it. Honestly, you've got to understand what's going on here. He said, "I've got great polls on the economy. I'm starting to get great polls on the economy." And the interviewer says, "No, the polls are terrible." And then he says, "Well, they should be great." So you're agreeing you're not getting great polls. So you were just lying. You were literally just lying. And now I've called you out on a lie. You're saying, okay, I'm not getting great polls, but they should be great. What?
On the economy, which I think
the polls on the economy aren't they're not great.
They should be great.
They should be. So why aren't they? If you believe that,
I don't know. I don't.
So he's gone full circle here. I've got great polls. No, you don't. They should be. Okay. Why should they be? I don't know. Why aren't they? I don't know. So you're now admitting that they aren't because you don't know why they aren't good. They should be good. So your initial claim that you're getting great polls is false. You have just literally admitted to lying.
I mean, look, I've got
Americans tell us, we hear this. I mean, we're going to get into the economy later, but I mean, they tell us they don't feel it.
Just so you understand.
Yeah.
I have $18 trillion being invested into the country. Biden had less than $1 trillion for 4 years, and the whole country was going to credit. You know,
when does America feel it?
Do you know that if they won that election, and we won in a landslide, do you know if they won that election, this country was, I think it was finished. I actually think it was finished. I'm starting to get great polls on the economy.
Yeah, no. So give over. Right. When you've got people like Ken Griffin, you know, big supporter of this kind of movement, Trump White House has enriched family members. When you've got people calling into question the grifting of the Trump family. Financial Times reporting here, Wall Street figure and Republican donor said the administration's self-dealing troubled him, adding that calls into question, is the public interest being served? You've got very serious people now starting to really question the Trump administration, who at the same time are refusing to release jobs numbers because they're so bad, saying that as a result of the government shutdown for the second time, they're not going to release jobs numbers. All at the same time that they are removing and changing Native American signage at Little Bighorn National Park in Montana. Not only are they taking stuff down about slavery that's uncomfortable, they don't want to hear or don't want to read, they're taking signage, Native American signage down because, hey, that's how inclusive they are. It's just, it's from one craziness to another. And we're going to kind of finish off with the Kennedy Center, now called the Trump Kennedy Center. He's closing it down. I didn't report on this. I had a few things. I was going to do a separate video on it, and she's never got around to it. Now it turns out he's going to close the Kennedy Center down, which is the premium arts center, government arts center. I have determined that the fastest way to bring the Trump Kennedy Center to the highest level of success, beauty, and grandeur is to cease entertainment operations for approximately a 2-year period of time. Therefore, the Kennedy Center will close on July the 4th. He's going to basically, I think, turn it into a gold lame covered, I don't know, just whatever. After numerous artists said they would no longer perform there, so that's really the key. So ticket sales have plummeted. People not performing there. Yeah, one of the operas has just one of the orchestras has just pulled out there, or one of the operas. They said they will no longer perform there. Ticket sales plummeting. Trump says he's closing the Kennedy Center for at least 2 years. Tim Kaine then talked about this. Here's just a little 25 seconds of him, the Democrat from Virginia.
Any thoughts on the closing of the Kennedy Center for 2 years?
This president is a joke. I mean, the guy is so insecure that he has to put his name on the center. And then when audiences and artists revolt, okay, well, I'm going to close it then. How pathetic. That's my reaction.
Got it. Thank you, Senator.
So, yeah, it's pathetic. Trump on his renovations at the Trump Kennedy Center. I'm not ripping it down. I'll be using the steel. We're using some of the marble, and some of the marble comes down. But when it's open, it will be brand new and really beautiful. Now, remember, he's torn down the east wing of the White House, and that is still, as far as I can work out, completely pulled down and nothing is being done about it. That is now in, and there are some claims he's pocketed 400 million. Well, he said it's going to cost $400 million. That's gone up from, it went, what was it, 100, 200, 250, 300, 350, 400. Just keeps going up. Some claims about the dubious nature of that fundraising and where that money's going. Federal government will spend $200 million of your taxes to turn the Kennedy Center into a tacky shrine to Trump. Have you seen the White House lately? And then after Trump leaves power, millions more will remove all that embarrassing tackiness. Your tax dollars at work. Like, Americans should be going nuts about this. All the while, the man is just getting older and older. There's this, I don't know if you've seen the video of Trump supposedly cacking himself in the Oval Office, and then they close the Oval Office down really quickly, move people out, and people sort of wrinkling their noses, and it was all very controversial. I was going to include that on videos before, but you're like, oh man, this guy's old. He is not in a good way, and he's making decisions that are just insane, whether it be the Kennedy Center or tariffs on whichever country. You know, whether it's trying to force Ukraine to capitulate for the Russians, or whether it's this or whether it's that. You know, everything that Trump is doing at the moment. I challenge you, even the most pro-Trumpy of Trump supporters. What are the good things that he's achieved? Okay, you could argue he's closed the southern border down, right? So he's successfully brought about a lack of immigration come across the southern border. But past that, if that's what floats your boat, past that, I can't think of anything that you could say that he's done well in a year of being in office. You know, and you think I'm a champion for like Keir Starmer or Labour. I'm not. I'm no big Labour guy, but I'm just like, I want kind of fairly centrist, centre-left, decent policies and politics that help out Ukraine, that bring us together as humanity, that help out the environment, that give good welfare system, that supports those in need in the country, that has a tax system that is responsible and taxes people accordingly, and so on and so forth. I'm just a fairly sensible kind of person, I see, in terms of my politics. You know, and you look at Starmer, he's like, right, working hard. We've got the NHS waiting list down. We've got childcare provisions, loads of early years and childcare provision stuff going on, you know, so on and so forth. There's a whole bunch of things that they've achieved. Defense spending going up, support for Ukraine, really big. And I'm like, yes, that this is all good. This is what leaders should be doing, right? And then you've got Trump just making insane decisions all day, every day, and it's enough to make a grown man cry, I have to say. Okay, right, that's enough from me, I guess. We live in crazy times. I do appreciate you guys for being here. I am sorry that I've had no one to go through the comments with me or for me in terms of your brilliant things that you've been saying. I'm quite, if we're just going to go, I'm going to give a couple of seconds on Ukraine at the moment. I do feel sorry for you guys in the US. I know, I never know what to call you, Chris, Evan. C-Staub, JP, we are living in an insane asylum in the USA. What I do worry about sometimes is I'm too anti-US, but I'm not anti-US. I'm anti like the Trump administration. It's just like the insanity of it all, and you know that. You know that. There's so many really decent Americans who I must think must be really pulling their hair out. I feel for you. I do feel for you. Just something on Ukraine really quickly while I'm finishing my wine. Nice bit Pinot, thank you. A few of you said this morning after my hits and losses video, oh, that's quite upbeat, energetic. And I'm quite upbeat. Last 2 days, as soon as Ukraine get back their missiles and their drones and hit the crap out of Russia on a nightly basis, it puts a spring in my step. And it's sad to say that I get happy with outright destruction, but when it comes to genocidal maniacs, I don't mind destroying their countries. You know, ability to continue to commit genocide, right? So I'm all for stopping that. It was an interesting post, and I'll go through it this morning because I've been wondering about this 6-week period where there have been far fewer drones and missiles going into Russia. But Magyar put out this list of things that have been achieved. He like had a go at people who've been criticizing that, you know, why haven't you been striking in the last whatever? And he's like, these are the things we've hit in the last 45 days. He's just brought out this massive list of things, which makes me wonder whether they have been hitting a bunch of things, but we just haven't been hearing about it. Anyway, I'll talk about that all with you tomorrow. I will unsubscribe if this isn't the last Trump audio. That's some double negatives going on there. I need to work out what I need to do. Do I need to put more Trump audios or stop Trump audios? Please don't unsubscribe. But you're just kidding. Okay, that's lucky. Anyway, that's enough from me. I really should go now. I've run out of things to say. I've never run out of things to say. I could literally just sit and talk to you about my experiences of watching Hamnet and why I liked it, and the meta story that was going on. I think it was interesting. I will say, this doesn't make a good politics video, but watch Hamnet, and halfway through it, the problem is when I watch stuff at home on the TV with my missus, right, I will pause stuff and I'll say, what's just happened there? And I'll just have, like I do with you guys, if something goes into my brain, I'm like, I recognize something, and she must just get so pissed off. And I'm just like, of course, that is done. Or have you seen what the director's done there? And you see the movement of the camera there, and how, oh, have you noticed this? And it's funny, like, we've been together for so long now that she's starting to recognize these things herself independently. Like, it's kind of rubbed off on her, and my geekiness. But like, there's some really interesting moments in the film where the camera just doesn't move, and it has, say, a room from left to right, and instead of like following the action around the room, it just sits there, and there's stuff going on here, and then they fall down there, and then they get up here, and you can just see their heads there, then it's down there, and it doesn't change at all. You're like, that's a really interesting decision from the director, just to show that. And I thought, it feels like it's a piece of art where you've got a painting and you're just seeing a bit of action or a bit of whatever, bit of drama. And I thought it was a comment on art. And this is where I started thinking, and subsequently my theories on the film were completely borne out when I Googled it afterwards. Like, I told you, my missus, I was like, this is what the film is about. Because she's like, what's it about? And I think it's about art, and how art helps you, in this case, grieve. William Shakespeare and his wife, they lose a child, and it really affects their relationship. And then she's like, what are you doing? You're never here. You're always up in London making plays. But then she goes to see a play, and then she understands that the play is his way of grieving, and that what happens in Hamlet is a metaphor for the loss of his son, and so on and so forth. And she gets it there, and she's in the audience, she's at the front, and it's really emotional at the end. Beautiful performances, wonderful acting, just from the kids and the adults alike, absolutely superb. But it's the idea that understanding that art gives you the ability to access emotion, or can allow you, in this case, to grieve. You can communicate with your audience what you're going through as an artist through, and then so when I was watching it, it's like, that's a painting, and it feels like, okay, so you're understanding, I'm feeling that through almost like a painting. But then, of course, it's William Shakespeare, so it's not that is the stage. So you don't move around on the stage, you don't have a camera like you do in film, you just have this thing that's there. So they had all the action going on, like, and I think that was a metaphor of the stage. And there were a bunch of really important scenes throughout the film where the camera doesn't move, and it just seems like in a really weird angle, where it just you just got this overview and there's stuff going on there, and that is a stage. And I'm like, that, I love it when not only that there's another level. So I remember watching Tom Cruise's Vanilla Sky, right, and listening to, was it not James Cameron, it's the other guy, Cameron thingy, who's the director of Vanilla Sky. No, yeah, Vanilla Sky. And I watched the DVD commentary on the film, right, and it was it made the film, like, the film was like, to me, it was a 7 out of 10 film. I watched the director's commentary, and it's like a 9 out of 10 film. I was like, that's amazing, I see what you've done here. But then if I don't get that when I'm watching it, then actually, no, it should be a 7 out of 10 film, because I shouldn't need it to be explained to me. So there's this tension between being a very clever film, but it's only very clever if it's explained to you. So I love it when I get, as a viewer, what the director or what the writer is trying to do in a piece of art, and I'm like, it's enough for me to be able to get that without needing to be explained, and then it just gives it this whole other level. And I felt that Hamnet was that, but it was at its heart, it was about grief and about loss, and it's just tremendously good acting. And but yeah, it was really interesting to look at the choice of shots, and what's going on there, always questioning. I say to my kids, I say that, and it's funny because they now get this, and whenever we're watching stuff, they're like, I say, nothing is in a set. So if you're a production designer, if you're a set designer for a film or a TV series or whatever, like, everything's been put there for a reason. So if you're looking at a room that someone's acting in, everything in that room has been placed and it's been thought of and a set designer has placed everything. So if you see a cross on the wall behind someone in some kind of film, that's communicating to you that this guy's a Christian, and therefore this is part of his character. Or if they're wearing a cross on their neck or something like that's a really obvious one. But everything is there for a reason, and so nothing is superfluous. Everything in film and cinema and TV is thought through. And it's recognizing that all the time and being geeky enough to and observant enough to connect all the dots when you're looking at this tableau of performance. Anyway, that's the end. I still haven't finished my wine. The problem is I can't finish my wine because I'm talking too much. But if I'm just drinking, then I'm not talking, and then you're just watching me drink. Alas, poor Yorick, for I knew him, Horatio, I think is the proper quote from Hamlet. To be or not to be, and that featured in there. To be or not to be. That is a question. Whether it is noble in mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Anyway, that's enough Shakespeare for me. Take care, everybody. This is essentially, it's near closing time. Yeah, we'll get the piano out soon and just have a bit of a sing song and then maybe have a lock in. No, there's no lock in tonight. I must go. I really must. You don't want me here any longer. So thank you very much, guys. I do have to say there's a few more super chats. So thank you. Nice one, JP. Oh no, I've done that one. Thank you, Michael. No, it's just actually Ronnie here. Thoughts on the voting bill requiring ID seems to be a good thing in elections if people can get the ID easily. Okay, goodness me. I've just done all my non-politics stuff and I'm just about to say goodnight and go to bed. And Ronnie hits me with this. Be wary about any voting rights bill because it's not about what it seeks to. It's not about what on the surface it seeks to achieve or seems to be. It's about the intention. So with a voting ID bill, it's invariably going to be who is it that's proposing a bill, and if it predominantly comes from, say, for example, the right wing, right, then you're going to assume that it's going to have something to do with constraining the left wing from being able to vote or something like that. And that's indeed what these things generally are. So on the one hand, yeah, we should all want as secure elections as possible. And if everyone's got the proper ID, then yeah, of course you should demand that. The question is, do we have a problem with voter fraud? And the simple answer is no. Like 0.00004% voter fraud in an election is not a problem. Does it require a solution? Well, you don't really need a solution to something that isn't a problem. So what they're doing is manufacturing a fake problem and saying, well, voter fraud's a problem, so we need to really tighten up voter ID. But what really happens here is that what you're doing is you're disenfranchising people who struggle to get voter ID. So, photo ID and stuff like the ability to get, if you're moving like ballot boxes, there's so many things that politicians try and do to stop the other side from voting or to stop certain people who sit in the demographics that will more likely vote for the other side from voting. So whether it's like removing ballot boxes from here, so then people have to bus in, and then people living in rural communities can't get there, so they're less likely to vote. But the sort of people that are living there are more likely in this particular place to be, black working class people, and therefore more likely to vote Democrat. So it's like, okay, so what's really going on is we're trying to stop this particular demographic from being able to vote. So when it comes to voter ID, it's generally about disenfranchisement of people who don't have that ID, just because it happens that the most people that are likely, it just so happens that people who sit in this particular demographic are more likely to struggle to get that kind of ID. And it just so happens that they are also more likely to vote Democrat. And that's really what goes on here. Now, if there was genuinely a problem with voter fraud, then by all means go and do this thing. Or if you're going to do this thing, then also have a policy put in place that then enables people to get ID really, really freaking easily, or not like really easily, but it's not an onerous task to get ID. You need to help people to vote rather than stop people from voting. Like the question you want to always be asking about these kind of bills and policies is, will it help people to vote? Like, you want to get more people to vote, not fewer people to vote. And if you're putting something in place that gets fewer people to vote, it might sound more sensible because it's going to make it more secure. But if you don't actually have a problem with security, then you're just going to be stopping people from voting. So therefore, why do you want to stop people from voting? Oh, I see. So you can win more easily. Okay, so this is just, it's nothing to do with voter security and voter fraud. It's to do with winning elections. And it's that simple. And it always is about winning elections. I hope that made sense. I didn't even go into the detail. I don't even know what. I think you're talking about the Republican bill that they want to advance. Is it the Safe America or something bill? But anyway, there are certain countries, that do it really well. For example, people talking about Czechia here. Here in Czechia, everyone is automatically registered to vote. I mean, you can make it so it is really secure and really easy. But it just takes a bit of effort. I just be very wary about. Always ask, what is the true motivation of the person advancing whatever bill it is? Do you genuinely have the electorate's wishes and benefit in mind here, or is this just to the benefit of you and your party? Okay, that's enough from me. Take care, everybody. Toodle Pit, speak to you tomorrow at some point, vaguely soon. I'm going to look at the socials now and see what's been going on in Ukraine and drink the rest of my wine. Take care. Toodle Pits, big love.